Amen. Thank you for that. Thank you to our praise team. They do a great job of leading us in worship. Well, this day has finally come. Yeah, I hear a couple of snide remarks on there, Sandy and I have been talking about and praying about and planning for retirement. Well, she's been doing it longer than I have, so she retired a few years ago, but she tried to get me to retire, but she's always wanted God to give me the timing. And so when we called Pastor Jay as our pastor in February of 2021, I said, okay, Brother Jay, I'll give you about 4 months. Well, that's 18 months. So I gave him multiples of 4 months. Please sign up to be here Saturday. I asked for beans and weenies, and they said we're going to have steak, so that's a lot better. We'll enjoy it, but we'll enjoy the fellowship together. I'd like to take an opportunity to talk to each of you or maybe address you publicly other than in a worship setting and let you know what you've meant in my life and our life. Share some of the stories that we could actually share in public. And some of you will get that later on. I'm actually going to do that Saturday night. I'm going to take a few minutes and talk about each one of the staff members that I've worked with for a great number of years. But the guy I worked with the longest is not going to be here. She wants to come see Grandpa. It's okay, we're going to let her. We're going to stop right here and let her do whatever she wants to do. Dr. Gregory Earl George. I've heard that name a few times over the last 31 years, mostly from his mother when he was in trouble. I don't think she said doctor, but she said Gregory Earl. We worked together for over 31 years. When you spend that much time with somebody, you know, thankfully we didn't start to look like each other. But I could know what he was thinking, and he pretty much knew what I was thinking. We could finish each other's sentences. He actually said from time to time that the two of us made one good pastor. Don't know about that. But he's going to be on vacation next week, so he won't be here. So somebody come eat his steak, please. Debbie, I appreciate that announcement. I was concerned there for a minute when you said this is his last sermon, but then you tacked on as our associate pastor. And then when she said he's been here a long time, it does seem like a long time. 33 years seems like a long time. Let me talk about Dr. George for a minute. Dr. G, as many of us know him because he got that name put on him from our preschoolers. He used to go visit the preschoolers once a week when preschool was in session. The Dr. G, Dr. G. A man who's the same in the office, in the pulpit, and in his private life. What you see is what you get. And so he's shared a lot of wisdom with me. He's been my mentor for 31 plus years. I didn't know anything when I started working with you. Well, a few things. But thank you for investing in my life. He married Sandy and I.
No, I'm here to keep Sandy.
Okay. I got the better deal out of that one, I guess, probably. But I do want to talk about some serious things today. Saturday, if you come, I'll have some brief comments, hopefully, to say about each one of our staff members. Thank you for Rita and Mickey being here. Where are they? I know they're here somewhere. Rita is what? The glue that holds the church together. Has been for 9 or 10, yeah. John amens that. Has been for 9 or 10 years, or for several years. But we appreciate that ministry, and it is a ministry. Any of you that have ever worked with her or done anything with her realize that. So what do I talk to you about after 33 years? You know, been pondering this, chewing on this. You know, from the index all the way through maps, pick out stuff to talk about in, you know, a given amount of time. Sandy and I have been talking a lot recently about contentment. So I thought maybe I'd share a little bit about that this morning. So we're going to be talking about contentment. The primary verse, comes from 1 Timothy chapter 6, verse 6. Now remember, Paul, the Apostle Paul, is writing to Timothy. He also has written to Titus. We've been in Titus the last few weeks as Pastor Jay's been leading us there. But he writes to Timothy and he says, godliness with contentment is great gain. So I thought we'd look, well, what is godliness and what is contentment? So I looked up a couple of definitions. Godliness is a proper response to the things of God, dedicating every decision to the glory of God. Do you ask God about the decisions you make before you make them? They sang a song. First name I call on is Jesus. So what's contentment? Being satisfied with what we have, who we are, and where we're going. And so Paul follows up in chapter 6 later on in 1 Timothy. He says, "For we brought nothing into the world, and we can take nothing out of it. But if we had food and clothing, we will be content with that. Those who want to get rich fall into a temptation and a trap, and many into foolish and harmful desires that plunge people into ruin and destruction. For the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. Some people eager for money have wandered away from their faith and pierced themselves with many griefs." So I actually thought, well, what does the Bible say about contentment? And there's a lot of verses in the New Testament. Jesus obviously addressed them. But I went back into the Old Testament and picked up one that was kind of unusual. It's from Ecclesiastes. Now, Solomon wrote 3 books. The Song of Solomon, or Song of Songs, which is a romance book. Proverbs, which is basically rules. And as far as we know, Ecclesiastes, which is a book of regrets. And I say as far as we know because some scholars say that Solomon didn't actually write it. It wasn't written until post-exilic time, so after the nation of Israel was brought back from exile. But in chapter 1, verse 1, he says, the teacher or the preacher, son of David, king of Israel. So that only identifies very few individuals. So I think it kind of points towards Solomon. Doesn't make any difference because there's great wisdom in this book, even if somebody wrote it after Solomon. So he leaves us with 5 principles. Principle number 1, the more we have, the more we want. He says in Ecclesiastes 5, chapter 10, "Whoever loves money never has enough. Whoever loves wealth is never satisfied with his income. This too is meaningless, vanity, futile." You can be rich or poor, but for most of us, when it comes to wealth, the one thing we have in common is that we'd like a little bit more. And Jesus reminds us in the story of the rich man in Luke chapter 12, he says, "A man's life does not consist in the abundance of his possessions." Barna does a lot of research in the United States in Christian situations, and he says that of people that earn $50,000 a year or less, 95% say they've not achieved the American dream. But on people who have earned $50,000 a year or more, 94% say they've not achieved the American dream. It doesn't sound like anybody he talked to believed they had achieved the American dream, regardless of what their income was. Remember your first car? You used to wash it, check the air pressure in the tires, have them rotated, and do all that stuff when you're supposed to. How about your second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth car? Yeah, you just park it in the driveway and put gas in it when it runs low. You don't find it nearly satisfying as the first one. Those who love money never have enough, Solomon says. Does anybody around here have enough money? Here's a test. Ask somebody, and if they tell you yes, offer them $20 and see if they take it. Wouldn't it be wonderful to be content? If you watch television, they're always challenging you with buy this, clothing, this car, this perfume, this whatever. Makes your hair look better, on and on and on. Excuse me. The power in Apostle Paul was that he learned to be content. Let's look at what it says in Philippians 4, 11 through 12. "I have learned to be content in whatever the circumstances. I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I've learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, living in plenty or in want." There is wisdom and power in learning to be content. Principle number 2 from Solomon. Ecclesiastes 5, verse 11 says, the more we have, the more we spend. He says, as goods increase, so do those who consume them, and what benefit are they to the owner except to feast his eyes on them? You get a new job, maybe you get a big promotion, comes through an unexpected raise. Maybe you get an annual increase. We could keep the same lifestyle and use the extra money wisely, but we're salivating over the prospect of a newer car, newer furniture, newer carpet, new floors, new, on and on and on. So Solomon says, what's the point of having more money if you just go out and spend it on whatever you get? I like the way Eugene Peterson says it in the Message. He says, the more loot you get, the more looters show up. There's an unwritten economical law that says expenses rise to meet available income. The end of our money comes before the end of our month does. For the average American, when the salary increase comes up goes their lifestyle and their related expenses. Chuck Swindoll, in one of his books, said, when a man's possessions increase, it seems that there's a corresponding increase in the number of parasites that live off him. Management consultants, tax advisors, accountants, lawyers, household employee, and sponging relatives. The more we have, the more we want. The more we have, the more we spend. Principle number 3, the more we have, the more we worry. The sleep of a laborer is sweet, whether he eats little or much, but the abundance of a rich man permits him no sleep. Boy, that ought to hit home with your 401k and retirement accounts and everything like that right now. If it keeps you up, I know an individual who checks the balance in his accounts every day. That would drive me absolutely nuts. It's not your money in the first place. It's God's money that you might invest. You ever lose a night's sleep, sleep over the status of your investments? Many people think that the more money you have, the more soundly you'll sleep tonight, but actually the opposite is true. You ever had a garage sale? Where do we get all this junk? Junque. 25 years ago, the average home was 1,600 square feet. Today, it's 2,400 square feet, even though the average family is smaller. Why? We've got to build more room to store our stuff. I got a book for you to read, Giving It All Away and Getting It All Back Again. I've got several copies in my office. If you want to come get one, I'd be glad to give it away. It's written by David Green, who's the founder of Hobby Lobby. Now, I'm not on their payroll, nor do I get a commission, nor do I get free stuff from them. So this is completely unsolicited. Hobby Lobby, as a foundation, gives away 50% of their profits to missions. They are ministry focused. Giving it all away and getting it all back again. And one of the places in the book that I remember specifically is he was praying and reciting the quote that most of us have said or heard, you can't outgive God. And it's like God sat on his shoulder and said, you never really tried, David, did you? Principle number 4, verses 13 and 14. The more you have, the more you lose. I've seen a grievous evil under the sun, wealth hoarded to the harm of its owner, or wealth lost to some misfortune. Solomon basically saying, you can't lose what you don't have. Now, that doesn't mean we should avoid seeking things because we might lose them, but we realized at the very beginning that as we assign one or more things in our lives, we take on additional responsibility and vulnerability. If you've ever bought a home for the first time, you'll understand that concept. We become attached to our possessions at our own risk because we have so much to lose. So here's a test to see if that principle affects you. If there's a hurricane coming, what would you take? Our neighbors in South Florida have gone through that just recently. We did it about 4 years ago in this area. So we go home this afternoon, we turn on the Weather Channel, or your favorite TV program, and we find out there's a hurricane out in the Gulf. It's heading this way. It's going to be here in 2 or 3 days. What are you going to take? Well, take your important papers and take, food and clothing and medicines and maybe pictures, stuff that's not replaceable. Some people would take their pets if they have them. Some people would take their children. That if all you could take is what you load in your car, what would you take? That kind of makes, things important, doesn't it? That assigns a sense of importance to those things that are close to you. Principle number 5, he says, the more we have, the more we leave. So that when he has a son, there's nothing left for him. Naked a man comes from his mother's womb, and as he comes, so he departs. He takes nothing from his labor that he can carry in his hand. This too is a generous evil. As man comes, so he departs. What does he gain since he toils for the wind? All his days he eats in darkness and great frustration, affliction, and anger. The modern translation of that, you can't take it with you. It's common sense. You work for things that you accumulate, but you really never own anything permanently. You only rent it for a season till you pass from this earth. All of your possessions, if they outlast you, will belong to somebody else someday. Maybe you've seen the bumper sticker, he who dies with the most toys wins. It actually ought to be corrected to say, he who dies with the most toys still dies, and he never takes any of those with him. When we die after devoting our lives to acquiring things, we move into eternity. But our toys and our earthly treasures stay behind us. We as Americans spend $40 billion a year in renting household storage, outside storage areas. There's about 2 billion square feet of rental space available. That's 5 square feet for every man, woman, boy, and girl that lives in the United States. 10% of households rent a place in a temporary rental facility. And there's reason for it. If you're changing from house to house and stuff like that, it's logical. But then you might say, well, it's only short term. No, the average rental is 15 months. We pay to store stuff for 15 months to figure out whether we're going to use it or not. So I ask you a question. What's in your garage? You have room to put a car in there? Did you build it to put a car in there? What's it being used for now? Well, enough bad news for this morning. You want some good news? Solomon gives us 2 reminders. He says in verse 18, God gives us the ability to earn money. There are no self-made men. Verse 18 says, then I realized that it's good and prosper for a man to eat and drink and find satisfaction in his toilsome labor under the sun during the few days of life God has given him, for this is his lot. And then Solomon goes on to say, God gives us the ability to enjoy money. He gives us the ability to earn money. He gives us the ability to enjoy money. Verse 19 and 20, moreover, when God gives any man wealth and possessions and enables him to enjoy them, to accept his lot and be happy in his work, this is a gift of God. He seldom reflects on the days of his life because God keeps him occupied with gladness of heart. We go back to the New Testament. Jesus kind of sums this up for us in the Sermon on the Mount, chapter 5, 6, and 7 of Matthew. And in the middle of that, you're familiar with it. He's talking about God taking care of the birds in the air and giving them comfort and food to eat and a place to go when there's a storm coming. And he says to his listeners, but seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things that we've talked about will be added unto you. Contentment. Paul said he learned to be content. If I could pour it into each one of you, I would, but I can't. You have to learn how to be content on your own. Put your significant things in the place of significance and let everything else sit aside. Seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be added unto you.
face shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord turn his face toward you and give you peace. The Lord bless you and keep you, make his face shine